You cannot understand North Carolina's history without understanding the Wilmington riots. Wilmington was the largest city in the South, and November 10th, 1898, Charles Aycock, who would later become governor, and Fernhost Simmons orchestrated the plan for a coup d'etat led by the Red Shirts, which was a paramilitary group like the Klan. When they were through, some studies said they killed 3 to 5% of the city, burned down the black newspaper, and declared that this was the way to return government to the proper ownership of the white man. By 1902, the last African American in the Congress that was from North Carolina, but he was the last period, George White, was in essence run out of the Congress. And so you had now an all-white Congress. Black voting went down to something like 0. It wasn't until the Civil Rights Movement that it began to return some, but the big return did not happen until after the Voting Rights Act in 1965. The Voting Rights Act basically came in to enforce what should already have been the law through the 15th Amendment. Now, North Carolina is curious. When the Voting Rights Act was passed, it only covered 40 counties, which meant 60 counties in North Carolina still were not covered. The Wilmington riots was not official history. So even though the riots occurred in Wilmington, New Hanover County, Brunswick County, none of those counties were covered. None of them. And so that's always been a curious history to us of what was covered and what was not covered. Within a few years, we returned an African American to the State House, Henry Fry. He had been denied the right to vote after the Voting Rights Act and then became the first, since Reconstruction, African American to serve in the North Carolina State House. By 1990, of course it was 25 years after the signing, you get the first African American returned to the United States Congress from North Carolina, Eva Clay. And then you get Mayor Watt. But think about that. Without the Voting Rights Act, none of the progress that we've seen would have happened. This is a story that's never been told. We had a great candidate in President Barack Obama, but if you go back and look in 2008, he lost on election day. He won during the same-day registration early voting. And during the same-day registration early voting, the Forward Together movement, the NAACP, we did something called the million-person march to the polls. And our goal was to get at least 1 million black and brown people to utilize same-day registration early voting. He won in the same-day registration early voting. He lost on election day. That's the practical impact.
I think the arc of American history has generally been that we have tried to be more inclusive when it comes to the franchise, starting with newly freed slaves, women, young people, 18-year-olds. There have been fits and starts, but generally the arc of American history has been to be more inclusive. Somehow, some way, I don't think it's a coincidence, with the election of Barack Obama in 2008, there was a concern about the Obama coalition that he had put together, a concern that there was going to be the loss of political power, and suddenly we heard this mantra about voter fraud.
There had been a number of voting changes that made access to the ballot box more ready and easier. And so part of the idea, I think, after the Obama election was to undo all of those things that allowed people who had not been participating in elections to participate more fully. The idea was that they didn't want this outcome again, and so one of the ways to do it was literally to change the rules that govern our democracy.
The aspects of House Bill 589 have been controversial, and it has been centering principally around photo identification, the compacted early voting period, which went from 17 down to 10 days, but required the same number of hours. Interesting formula. The end of straight ticket voting. You used to be able to pull the effective lever and determine whether you were casting for all Republicans or all Democrats. You also saw the elimination of pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds who wouldn't be 18 by the time of the next election. And that principally took place in high schools and also in DMVs, which you would expect, because that's when people are kind of having their first DMV run through, and that's where a lot of North Carolina's voters register.